Part 1. Blood-red morning in Albuquerque, the day a golden twilight melted away. Ladies and gentlemen, let's turn the clock back 30 years. It was February 1992. Albuquerque, New Mexico, was quiet and peaceful as always. The desert wind carried a chill, but the morning sun shone down warmly, like a mother's embrace. Living there was a grandmother named Stella Liebeck. 79 years old, 80 by Korean counting. Stella was vibrant and healthy. She had worked diligently all her life as a department store clerk to raise her children, and in her retirement, she stayed active with volunteer work, enjoying her golden years more than anyone. Stella had a reliable grandson named Chris. That morning, as usual, she climbed into the passenger seat of her grandson's 1989 Ford Probe. Screen a worn but clean car dashboard. Peaceful street scenery passing by the window. Close-up of Stella's gentle smile. "Grandma, shall we grab a coffee before heading to the airport?" At her grandson's affectionate question, Stella nodded. The car was filled only with the hum of the old heater and the murmur of their conversation. Until that moment, Stella's life was perfect. A healthy body, a loving family, and the beautiful scenery outside the window. No one, not even God, seemed to foresee that this ordinary happiness would turn into a hellfire just moments later. The car glided into the local McDonald's drive-thru. A dry voice flowed from the speaker, and Stella ordered a breakfast set and a cup of coffee. "That'll be 49 cents. Just a few coins." That warm black liquid, bought for mere pocket change, was like a small comfort to melt the morning chill. Her grandson, Chris, took the coffee and handed it to Stella. Here is an important fact. The Ford Probe Stella was riding in at the time did not have cup holders. Cup holders are standard these days, but not back then. The car came to a complete stop in the parking lot. It was not moving. Chris put the gear in Park P with the engine running and waited so his grandmother could comfortably add sugar and cream to her coffee. Stella leaned forward slightly with practiced movement. With nowhere to put the cup, she clamped it between her knees. She held the cup firmly with her left hand and grasped the edge of the lid with her right. To open the tight plastic lid, she applied a little more pressure with her knees. Everyone, imagine that split second. The moment she expected the lid to pop open. The thin styrofoam cup could not withstand Stella's grip and the force of her knees, and instantly collapsed with a pop. It didn't just spill, it exploded. The 190-degree liquid trapped inside poured out like a broken dam, gushing between Stella's lower abdomen and thighs. 190 degrees Fahrenheit. That is roughly 88 degrees Celsius. Water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit 100 C. At 190 degrees, it's not a temperature where you can just say, "Ouch, that's hot," and move away. Our skin suffers burns in just 1 second at 140 degrees. Imagine 190. This was not coffee, it was colorless lava, a fireball in liquid form. The clothes Stella was wearing happened to be cotton sweatpants. This fabric didn't repel water, it absorbed it instantly like a sponge. Holding that boiling liquid, the fabric clung tight to Stella's tender skin. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The scalding liquid flowed over her groin, buttocks, and thighs, cooking every inch of flesh it touched. Stella was rushed to a nearby emergency room. When the doctors cut away her pants with scissors, The nurses there had to turn their heads away. It was horrific. The doctor's diagnosis was full-thickness burns, third-degree burns. This means it didn't just scald the surface of the skin, but the heat penetrated deep into the fat and muscle layers beneath, cooking them completely. 6% of Stella's body suffered third-degree burns, and 16% of her body was burned in total. The damage was especially severe around the groin, the most sensitive and vulnerable area. The doctor said, if you had been a little later, she could have died from shock. It was too harsh a punishment for a 79-year-old to bear. The treatment process was tantamount to torture. Every time she underwent debridement, scrubbing away dead flesh, Stella begged them to just let her die. Skin graft surgeries, taking skin from her thighs, continued for 8 days. Even after being discharged, Stella couldn't walk or go to the bathroom alone. Her weight dropped to 83 pounds 38 kilograms, leaving only bare bones. That stylish grandmother who used to go volunteering energetically was now reduced to a state where she couldn't even get out of bed without her daughter's support. One ordinary cup of coffee. That 49-cent cup completely took away the dignity and happiness a human being had built up over 80 years. But everyone, what was even more astounding was the attitude of the corporate giant, McDonald's, in the face of this terrible suffering. Their cold ridicule would eventually lead Stella, from her sickbed, to the battlefield of the courtroom. This was not a simple mistake. It was a predicted disaster. Why did McDonald's insist on selling coffee that hot? And how did this grandmother come to draw her sword against that colossal Goliath? The bare face of that hidden greed will be revealed in Act 2. Act 2, an $800 insult, waking the sleeping lion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's return to the hospital room. After 8 agonizing days of skin graft surgeries, Stella was finally discharged. But this wasn't the end of her suffering, it was the beginning of a new ordeal. Her daughter, Judy, had to take leave from her job to change her mother's diapers. Massaging her mother's gaunt legs, which had lost over 40 pounds, Judy swallowed her tears every night. The physical pain was terrible, but the helplessness of having to lie there in diapers, after living a life of dignity, hurt the family even more. Then, the hospital bill arrived. $20,000. That is a lot of money now, but in 1992, it was a fortune. Medicare covered some of it, but the rest became a significant debt for the family. Stella and her family sat around the dining table. They had no intention of blaming anyone or trying to hit the jackpot. They just wanted to resolve it sensibly. Stella spoke to her daughter with trembling hands. "Dear, please write a letter to McDonald's. I was careless and spilled it, yes, but the coffee was far too hot, so I bear some responsibility, but shouldn't they bear some too? Ask them to just help cover the money I had to pay out of pocket." The letter written was incredibly polite. "Your coffee was so hot it caused severe burns. Please lower the temperature a little, and we would appreciate it if you could reimburse us for the medical expenses we incurred." The amount Stella requested was, even including compensation for pain and suffering, only about $20,000. To the world's biggest hamburger empire, McDonald's, $20,000 was pocket change less than the cost of the burger buns they threw away in a single day. A few days later, the awaited reply arrived. Stella thought, they are a big company, surely there will be a letter of apology. But when Judy opened the envelope, her face turned ashen. There was no apology inside. Just a few lines of cold legal jargon and a shocking offer. "We accept no legal responsibility. It was your mistake. However, as a gesture of goodwill to a regular customer, we offer you $800. Take this and let's consider the matter closed." Everyone, $800. They threw $800 at a person whose skin had melted off, who couldn't walk, and who needed 2 years of rehabilitation. This was not a settlement. This was an insult. "Here, take this. Take this money and be quiet. Don't make a fuss just because an old lady spilled some coffee." It was as if they were tossing coins to a beggar. They treated Stella's suffering as cheap, $800 trouble. Stella held the letter and shook with rage. Hotter than the pain from the burns was the humiliation rising from deep within her chest. Am I a beggar? Is it okay to ignore a human being like this? Stella's pride, having lived her whole life without causing trouble for others, was ruthlessly trampled by that number 800. In that moment, something changed inside Stella. It wasn't greed for money. It was a sense of justice. This isn't right. There shouldn't be another victim like me. If I don't break their arrogance now, they will forever see people as worth only $800. The family started looking for a lawyer. But it wasn't easy. Local lawyers shook their heads. "Grandma, the opponent is McDonald's. They are a dinosaur with the world's best legal team. It's like throwing an egg against a rock. Just take the $800 and forget it." Everyone told her to give up. Some even sneered, "Didn't you spill the coffee yourself?" But one person, a lawyer from Texas, smelled blood in this case. His name was Reed Morgan. Reed Morgan. Rather than a gentle gentleman, he was a lawyer like a hunting dog who never lets go once he bites. He looked at the photos of Stella's burns and knew instinctively. This isn't a simple burn. This is on the level of acid. Just how hot was that temperature? He declared war on McDonald's. And he filed a lawsuit. McDonald's coffee is a defective product. Therefore, we sue for punitive damages. McDonald's headquarters scoffed. A country lawyer from Texas and an old lady dare to challenge us? We don't even need to go to trial. Drag it out in court and make them give up from exhaustion. They were confident. They had overwhelming money, time, and legal knowledge. But they overlooked one thing. The existence of a secret document that Reed Morgan had found. While preparing for the trial, Reed Morgan succeeded in obtaining McDonald's internal operations and training manual. And there, he discovered a shocking phrase. Coffee extraction and holding temperature must be maintained at 180-190 F. The lawyer doubted his eyes. 190 degrees Fahrenheit? Everyone, do you drink coffee at 190 degrees at home? No. Home coffee makers usually brew at around 135 to 140 degrees. That is hot enough and tasty. If you spill 140-degree coffee, your skin turns red, but it doesn't melt. But 190 degrees is different. At this temperature, human skin suffers third-degree burns in just 2 to 7 seconds. This means the moment it spills, your flesh cooks before you even have a chance to take off your clothes. Why on earth? Why did they insist on such a dangerous temperature? The truth the lawyer dug up was strictly the logic of money. McDonald's main customers were commuters driving to work. They didn't drink the coffee right away, they drove to their offices. McDonald's thought, if the coffee gets cold, they'll ask for a refund saying it tastes bad. If we make it boiling hot from the start, it will be cool enough to drink by the time they get to work, right? That makes inventory management easier and reduces complaints. In the end, to extend the taste and shelf life of the coffee, they abandoned human safety. Whether a customer burned their mouth drinking it right away or spilled it and got burned was not their concern. Their only goal was to sell coffee that doesn't get cold, to maximize profit. An even more horrifying fact was revealed in the past accident records Reed Morgan requested from McDonald's. McDonald's had brazenly claimed, "Stella is the first person to have such an accident." But the documents the lawyer forced them to surrender contained records of over 700 coffee burn accidents in the past 10 years. Among them were elderly people like Stella, young people sitting in driver's seats, and even infants sitting in car seats in the back. Imagine an infant's tender skin touched by 190-degree coffee. Isn't it terrible just to imagine? McDonald's already knew. They knew their coffee could hurt people. The warning bell rang 700 times. But they shoved those records deep into a drawer and didn't lower the temperature by even a single degree. Why? To them, 700 burn victims were a statistically insignificant number, compared to the millions of cups sold daily. They had already calculated that handing a few pennies to burn victims to shut them up was cheaper than adjusting the temperature of coffee machines in stores worldwide. Knowing all these truths, Stella said in a trembling voice, This is something a devil would do. You can't treat people like this." Now, the fight was no longer a lawsuit for $20,000 in medical bills. It became a battle between a monster corporation that calculates the value of human life on a calculator and a David trying to regain the human dignity trampled by that monster. August 1994, Albuquerque District Court. With the whole world watching, the trial of the century is about to begin. Will the jury be fooled by the flashy arguments of the corporate giant, or will they see the truth hidden within the grandmother's charred wounds? Everyone, the fierce courtroom battle that makes your palms sweat, and the thrilling blow that breaks the arrogant nose of the McDonald's executive, unfolds in Act 3. Stay tuned. Act 3: The Courtroom Twist, the day the mask of arrogance fell. Ladies and gentlemen, August 18, 1994. The massive doors of the Albuquerque District Court in New Mexico closed. Outside, the hot summer sun was beating down, but the air inside the courtroom was as cold as a Siberian winter. Below the judge's bench sat 12 citizens in the jury box. They were ordinary people, like your neighbor next door or the lady at the local supermarket. Their expressions were skeptical at first. Honestly, they were initially thinking this. Wait, she spilled the coffee herself, so why blame McDonald's? They say America is a land of lawsuits, but this is ridiculous. In the defendant's seat sat a team of high-priced lawyers hired by McDonald's. Wearing flashy Italian suits and carrying briefcases full of evidence they were sure would win the case, they were overflowing with confidence. Occasionally, they would whisper to each other and smirk. To them, 79-year-old Stella sitting in her wheelchair was likely seen as just an annoying old woman trying to grab some cash. But they didn't know. They didn't know that standing next to that wheelchair, The Texas lawyer Reed Morgan had a sharp sword called the Truth hidden in his chest. As soon as the trial began, McDonald's lawyers launched a fierce offensive. Their logic was simple and clear, enough to make listeners nod their heads. Ladies and gentlemen, coffee must be hot to taste good. Would you pay for lukewarm coffee? McDonald's simply served it hot to provide the best taste customers want. Millions of customers love that heat. Then, they turned the arrow toward the grandmother. The plaintiff, Mrs. Stella Liebeck, opened the lid inside a car, specifically by holding the cup between her knees. In an old car without cup holders. Isn't this clear negligence? If she had opened it calmly on her kitchen table, this wouldn't have happened. Why blame the company for her own mistake? A few jurors nodded. It sounded right. Coffee is naturally hot, and Stella was the one who spilled it. The atmosphere in the courtroom seemed to tilt toward McDonald's. Stella's daughter, Judy, bit her lip and lowered her head. Just as despair was setting in, thinking it was a losing battle, lawyer Reed Morgan rose from his seat. Reed Morgan didn't raise his voice. He asked the jury in a very calm and low tone. That is correct. Coffee should be hot. But members of the jury, can we call a liquid that melts skin in 2 seconds a food? Or should we call it a weapon? He pointed to the board he had prepared. McDonald's insists on 190 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, third-degree burns occur in just 2 to 7 seconds. There is no time to take off clothes, no time to wipe it away. The moment it spills, an irreversible disaster has already occurred. And then he dropped a bombshell. Did McDonald's not know this was dangerous? No. Over the past 10 years, they received over 700 reports of burn accidents. Among them were women whose buttocks were completely burned, and children left with permanent disabilities. McDonald's knew. They were warned 700 times that the coffee they sold could hurt people. But they did not lower the temperature even once. Now, the highlight of this trial began the cross-examination of Christopher Appleton, the executive in charge of quality control at McDonald's. Reed Morgan began to snare him slowly, like a wolf waiting for its prey. Morgan, witness. McDonald's manual states to maintain coffee temperature between 180 and 190 degrees, correct? Appleton, yes, that is correct. That is the optimal temperature to bring out the full flavor of the coffee. Morgan, did you know that if liquid at 190 degrees touches human skin, it causes third-degree burns? Appleton hesitating briefly. Yes. We knew. The courtroom stirred. They knew. They sold it knowing that. But the real shock came next. Morgan, then, do you also admit that 190-degree coffee is in a dangerous state for customers to drink immediately? Appleton, that is correct. If you drink it at that temperature, it will burn your throat. That is why we put a warning on the cup. Appleton was confident. His logic was, it's too hot to drink, but you can just let it cool down. The lawyer dug into that gap. Morgan, witness, you also knew that over 700 people had suffered burns, right? Then, does McDonald's have any plans to lower the temperature to prevent these accidents? Everyone, normally in this situation, common sense would be to say, we will be careful in the future, or, we will review it. But this arrogant executive uttered a remark that made everyone in the courtroom doubt their ears. Appleton, no. We have absolutely no intention of lowering the temperature." Silence filled the courtroom. Even the judge adjusted his glasses in surprise. The lawyer asked again, "Morgan, even though 700 people were burned? Are you saying those people aren't enough?" At this moment, what Appleton said set fire to the hearts of the jurors. Appleton, "Counselor, let's do the math. We sell billions of cups of coffee a year. 700 cases out of that? That is statistically less than a fraction of a percent. It is a statistically insignificant number. Most customers like hot coffee. Should the remaining customers drink tasteless coffee just because of those few people? We have no intention of doing that. Statistically insignificant number." He treated Stella's terrible pain, the screams of children who received skin grafts, as a mere calculation error. He saw people not as humans, but only as numbers in a ledger. In that moment, the eyes of the jurors changed. They would view me, and my family, as just statistical numbers too. Even if I died drinking McDonald's coffee, they wouldn't bat an eye. It was the decisive moment when McDonald's arrogance turned the jury into their enemies. Reed Morgan fought with words no longer. He quietly pulled down the projector screen and displayed photos of Stella's burns. It was horrific. The groin area turned black like charcoal, unbelievable as human skin. Thighs gouged so deep the bone seemed visible. Skin tissue slashed like a net for graft surgery. It wasn't just a hot coffee spill. It was an injury you would expect to see on a battlefield. The lawyer spoke to the jury. "Everyone," the McDonald's executive called this a statistically insignificant number. "Does this wound look insignificant to you? Is this hell, that an 80-year-old grandmother had to endure a fair price to pay to protect the taste of a 49-cent cup of coffee?" Sniffling sounds were heard from the jury box. One juror clenched their fist in anger. The wounds in the photo spoke more powerfully than any speech. This was not an accident. It was violence. After all testimonies ended, Reed Morgan stood for his closing argument. He pointed at the McDonald's defense team and shouted, "McDonald's says they sold it hot because customers wanted it. But no customer expected that opening a lid would cause their skin to melt off. The corporation knew. They knew, but they did not warn. Why? Because if coffee gets cold, it has to be thrown away, and that costs money." They did not show remorse even in this courtroom today. Instead, they insulted 700 victims by calling them insignificant. Members of the jury, there is nothing a powerless individual can do against this giant Goliath. Only you can do it. Simply paying for medical bills is not enough. They will consider that money chump change. We must judge them with the thing they cherish most, the only thing they fear. Money. Please punish their greed so they never again gamble with human safety, so they never again view customers as numbers. The message must be clear. Human life comes before corporate profit. When the lawyer's argument ended, a breathless silence hung over the courtroom. Now, the ball was in the court of the 12 jurors. What decision would they make? Did they just tell them to pay for the medical bills? Or did they bring down a hammer that would turn the world upside down? Everyone, that legendary verdict, the thrilling and exhilarating moment when the number $2.9 million was born, unfolds in the final Act 4. Act 4, the $2.9 million thunderbolt, the day justice judged greed. All arguments were concluded. The judge instructed the jury to reach a verdict, and the 12 jurors entered the small deliberation room next to the courtroom. Now, all that was left was the wait. The clock in the courtroom pointed to the afternoon. Tick, tock. The sound of the second hand moving sounded as loud as thunder in the suffocating silence. Stella sat in her wheelchair, clasping her hands in prayer. God, I do not wish for a windfall. Just please reveal that I was not wrong, that I am not just a greedy old woman. On the other hand, the McDonald's defense team in the defendant's seat still pretended to be relaxed. They sat with their legs crossed, twirling their pens, or whispering jokes to each other. They believed. Jurors might be emotional, but in the end, they will judge rationally. Spilling the coffee was the old lady's mistake, wasn't it? At most, they'll give her a few pennies for medical bills and be done with it. Their arrogance pierced the sky until the very end. But behind the tightly closed doors of the jury room, a fierce debate no one expected was taking place. What erupted from there was not rational calculation, but common sense rage. After a long wait of about 4 hours, the jury room doors finally opened. The jury has reached a verdict. At the bailiff's shout, the courtroom stirred. The McDonald's executives sat up straight, and Reed Morgan gently placed his hand on Stella's shoulder. The 12 jurors walked in single file. Their expressions were heavy. No, solemn would be the correct word. They didn't even glance at the defendant's seat. The moment he saw those cold eyes, a drop of cold sweat ran down the spine of McDonald's lead counsel. He instinctively felt that something was going wrong. The judge asked, 4% of the jury, have you reached a verdict? The representative stood up. The paper in their hand was trembling slightly. It felt as if all breathing in the courtroom had stopped. It was so quiet you could even hear the sound of a dry swallow. The jury foreperson opened their mouth. First, we find that the defendant McDonald's coffee was a defective product, and they are liable for failing to properly warn customers of its danger. Wow! A small gasp erupted from the gallery. They acknowledged McDonald's guilt, but a cold judgment followed immediately. However, we also recognize the negligence of the plaintiff, Stella Liebeck, for attempting to open the coffee lid in an unstable car. Therefore, we calculate the responsibility for this accident as 80% McDonald's and 20% Stella Liebeck. Everyone, this is the reasonable law of America. They didn't just blindly take the grandmother's side. They saw it as, yes, Grandma should have been careful too. We admit that. But the responsibility of the corporation that sold the dangerous product is much greater. So, the jury decided that out of the actual damages, medical bills, pain and suffering, etc., of $200,000, McDonald's should pay $160,000, deducting the 20% for Stella's negligence. Up to this point, it was practically a victory for McDonald's. Only $160,000? To McDonald's, that was less than pocket change. Smiles of relief spread across the faces of the McDonald's defense team. Phew, I knew it. We defended well with just that amount. They exchanged glances and prepared to pack their bags. But the real verdict was written on the next line. The jury foreperson paused to catch their breath. Then, glaring at the McDonald's executives, they read the next sentence in a clear and powerful voice. we find that the conduct of the defendant McDonald's went beyond simple negligence and was willful, malicious, and in reckless disregard for the safety of others. Accordingly, we order punitive damages. Punitive damages. This is not just compensation for damages, but a fine meaning, you are very bad people. So you need to be punished severely so you wake up and never do this again. The faces of the McDonald's lawyers turned white. The amount. What is the amount? The foreperson shouted. We set the amount at $2.7 million. Music. The climax of a grand and thrilling symphony bursts out with a bang. Bang, bang, bang. With the sound of the judge's gavel, the courtroom fell into a crucible of shock. $2.7 million. It was an astronomical amount, unimaginable in 1994 prices. Screams and cheers erupted from the gallery, and the McDonald's executives stood there with their mouths open, blankly, as if hit on the head with a hammer. Stella just quietly shed tears. It wasn't because of the money. It was because the world had recognized her pain, and the sorrow she had suppressed burst forth. 5. The secret of $2.7 million, just 2 days of coffee sales. Everyone, why did the jury call out the specific number of $2.7 million? Did they just write down whatever they felt like? No. There was a terrifying and exhilarating logic hidden here. During the trial, the jury asked, "What is McDonald's daily revenue from selling coffee worldwide?" The answer was about $1.35 million a day. The jurors put their heads together. This corporation is a monster that doesn't blink an eye even if 700 people get hurt. A fine of a few tens of thousands of dollars? They won't even snort at it. In that case, one juror suggested, "Let's take away just 2 days' worth." Excuse me? The money McDonald's earns from selling coffee in all its stores worldwide for just 2 days. Shouldn't we take at least that much to teach them a painful lesson? $1.35 million times 2 days. That is how it became $2.7 million. The meaning of this verdict was clear. You have no right to keep even 2 days' worth of that money you earned by ignoring human safety. Cough it up. It was not a simple compensation, but the rod of justice with which citizens slapped the face of giant capital. However, the world was very harsh. The day after the verdict, newspapers and broadcasts went into a frenzy. But they left out the truth and only picked sensational headlines. Grandma takes $2.9 million for spilling coffee. America is a lawsuit republic. I'm going to McDonald's to spill coffee too. Was it due to McDonald's lobbying? The media condemned Stella as a money-crazed fraud, and the jury as emotional fools. People, unaware of the horror of 180 Degrees, mocked Stella, focusing only on the money. And there were realistic legal limitations. The judge in charge ruled that, while I understand the jury's intent, the amount is excessive, and slashed the punitive damages to $480,000. Eventually, McDonald's and Stella settled privately. The exact amount was not revealed, but it is said to have been less than $600,000. Did Stella live in luxury with millions? No. She paid off medical bills, paid legal fees, and lived quietly with the remaining money, treating the aftereffects of her burns for the rest of her life. She did not sit on a cushion of money. Although the money was reduced, Stella's fight was not in vain. No, it was a great victory. After this trial, McDonald's quietly lowered its tail. They lowered the coffee temperature by more than 10 degrees, changed the lids to be sturdier, and printed a warning on the cup in very large letters, "Caution hot." Other franchise cafes also strengthened their safety standards. That warm cup of coffee you drank this morning. The safe hot chocolate your grandchild drinks. That is the safety we enjoy thanks to Stella enduring the pain of third-degree burns and the ridicule of the world. In 2004, Stella passed away peacefully at the age of 91. Her daughter said, "Mother couldn't even spend all that money before she passed. But she was proud of that trial all her life. Because she believed she contributed to making the world a little safer." Everyone, we often give up, saying it's like throwing an egg against a rock. What can an old person like me do? How can I beat a big corporation? But remember, a rock is dead, but an egg is alive and can jump over the rock. Stella's cane broke the arrogance of a giant corporation, and her burn scars left a warning on our society's conscience that will never be erased. Your rights, your dignity, no one will protect them for free. Be angry in the face of injustice. And demand confidently. That is the true dignity of an adult. We must learn from Stella Liebeck.